He became the first person to complete long-distance swims in each of the classical 7 seas. He's also swum like a polar bear, hopefully with a little fat covering on his skin because he doesn't have much underneath it. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I'm speaking to endurance swimmer Lewis Pugh about achieving the impossible. He became famous courtesy of Investec ads. I think that was probably a nice launch for you, wasn't it? I mean, you had been doing lots of endurance swimming, you've been doing lots of campaigning, but the Investec ads actually made you a household name.
Certainly in this country it did,
yeah.
and also in the United Kingdom, so they flighted the adverts in both countries, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and has that helped your role as an ambassador for the oceans?
It helped and it didn't help. It helped in the sense that I suddenly became a household name, but I earned my income through public speaking, and no other bank or building society or financial services, anybody, they didn't touch me for 5 years. Until the end of that advertisement, and then suddenly I got a lot more speeches.
It's amazing. I mean, you're cursed if you do, you're cursed if you don't.
Yes.
What triggered the obsession? What triggered the obsession with the oceans?
I grew up in Plymouth in England. It's an amazing city. It's where all the great explorers from Britain have come from. And I remember as a young boy sort of walking down the street and seeing statues of Drake and Raleigh and these type of people, and Captain Scott, and thinking to myself, you know, one day I want to go to sea. And I then later on we moved to Cape Town. I was right next to the sea and I immediately loved it.
But your dad was an admiral, wasn't he, in the Navy?
He was. He wasn't much of a swimmer himself, nor was I. So at the age of 17 I had my first proper swimming lesson and I absolutely loved it.
Age of 17?
Yes.
But how did you manage to avoid water for that long?
Well, I went to school in Grahamstown. There wasn't a lot of swimming in Grahamstown as a young boy. As soon as I went to Cape Town, though, I went to a school called Camps Bay High School. Yeah. PT was on the beach. It was hard to avoid swimming when you went to Camps Bay High School.
But then PT on the beach, you're in the ocean there as well. You talk in your speeches. You wrote a recent piece in the Sunday Times about the degradation of the oceans and your real concern that it's happening at an alarming rate. Yeah. And the rate of degradation is increasing. And you talk about the Aegean. I've been to the Aegean, and you go to a restaurant that's offering fish on the menu, and the fish are that big. Yeah. There is just nothing left in many of the world's oceans.
Well, the WWF produced a report where they were saying half of the wildlife on this planet has been lost in just the last 40 years. I swam in the Aegean, I swam in the Black Sea, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the North Sea, all these seas, all 7 of them. The biggest fish that I saw was literally 30 centimeters long. I saw no sharks, I saw no dolphins, I saw no whales. It's a damning indictment of what we have done over the last 40 years. I
mean, you grew up in if your dad was in the Navy on the False Bay coast, people would be delighted to have no great white sharks in False Bay so they could have free reign of the oceans. But the point you make is without the food chain, without the predators, the ocean life dies.
Sharks are absolutely crucial for a healthy ecosystem. About 100 million sharks are fished out of the oceans every single year. And that's like going to the Serengeti or going to the Kruger National Park and taking out all the lions. Without the lions, the wildebeest, the zebras, the antelope, they're all going to start increasing in numbers. When they increase in numbers, there's going to be no more grass left, and soon they will starve to death. Just as we need predators on land, we need predators in the water as well.
Do the same rules apply in the ocean as well?
Yes, certainly, because what happens is you get so many fish, they eat all the little fish then devour everything. You just have a barren landscape. I remember swimming now in the Red Sea, and just underneath me was literally nothing. It was like an underwater desert in certain parts. But the point was, I also swam across some areas which have recently been declared marine protected areas. So these are like national parks in the seas, and it was an amazing transformation.
So you can reverse then degradation of the oceans.
Yes, but it does take time. It does take time. But when they have been implemented properly, and certainly in places like New Zealand and the Philippines, they have nice big marine protected areas. The recovery has been absolutely amazing, and the ones which I saw, or the one which I saw in the Red Sea, was astonishing. Underneath me was blue, yellow, green, orange coral. Underneath there were, it's just an array of fish. It was amazing to see what we can do if we set our minds to actually protecting the oceans.
There's the industrial, I suppose, the industrial capital, big industry capitalizes on the oceans, massive fishing. You talk about 100 million sharks a year, which comes down to what, 3 a second or something insane when it comes to the rate at which sharks are being fished out of the ocean. We talk about the degradation of fish. All of that sort of stuff is going on an industrial scale. But then there's also the weight of human pressure. There are 7 billion of us on this planet. How can we preserve a natural resource when there are ever more of us and it seems like less of everything else?
It's interesting, this projection in population. When my father was born, the world's population was 2.5 billion people. When I was born, the world's population was 5 billion people. We're now about 7 billion people. We're expected to go to 9 billion people by 2050. Your point is very, very well made. How on earth do you feed a population of 9 billion people and increasing? We think the marine protected areas are the way forward. You set aside parts of the ocean. There the fish are allowed to recover. The stocks recover. Obviously fish, or a lot of fish, are migratory species. They go into areas where you can fish. It's a way of ensuring that we have food security. If we, however, decide not to have marine protected areas, and for a country, let's say like South Africa, where less than 1% of the coast of mainland South Africa, less than 1% is actually a marine protected area, then you very, very soon you're going to have a situation where you won't have food, and so you won't have fish. And without fish, fish provide protein for so many people around the world, especially here in South Africa.
I had the chief executive of INJ on the show recently, and he was talking about the vast abundance of hake in the oceans, and how hake supplies are actually pretty secure and pretty solid, courtesy of good management of the resource. You're smirking like you don't believe him. Did you do a course in diplomacy as you've been swimming the oceans?
It's laughable. It's laughable, and one wonders whether they actually believe that type of stuff. You know, I've just come back. I've had my head in the sea for 4 weeks. You get a very, very good idea about the health of the ocean when you put your head in the sea for 4 weeks, and wherever I go in the world, whether I'm swimming in the Atlantic, in the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Arctic, wherever I'm going, I'm just seeing the numbers of fish decreasing. I'm seeing pollution. I'm seeing the impacts of climate change.
How willing are governments to reverse this?
Some are very willing. President Obama now has declared a number of marine protected areas in the Pacific. These collected together will form the biggest national park ever declared in the world. So that's a wonderful. But he could have done a lot more. Okay, but that's absolutely fantastic. Other governments around the world, and I specifically set out South Africa, are way behind.
Is there no willingness, or is there not an appreciation of the extent of the problem? What's the issue?
I don't think that policymakers around the whole world have grappled with and understood the severity of the issue. Environmental campaigners make the mistake of going in to meet policymakers and saying, we need to protect the environment for our children and our grandchildren. It's not about our children, and it's certainly not about our grandchildren. The changes which we are seeing now, right here today, okay, are going to influence every single person on this planet. Okay, the only people who are in the safe are those people who are sitting in retirement homes.
What is the consequence of a failure to act in our lifetimes?
Food security. I mean, that would be the major issue, food security. And also, the other issue, which is obviously tied in with the oceans. 3 things affect the oceans. Number 1, overfishing. Number 2, pollution. And number 3, climate change. The impact of not acting on climate change right now, I mean, it's not even worth thinking about.
I mean, there's some climate change denialists. People say ever since the asteroid hit just at 3 or 4 south of here, climate has been changing. Climate is an evolving beast.
I mean, the issue on climate change is divided. The scientists, they're very, very clear on what is causing it. That it is in the main caused by man. That the rest of the people who are denying it, they are simply deniers.
The oceans must be warmer because you swam at the North Pole with polar bears.
I swam at the North Pole. So back in 2007, I went to do a symbolic swim up there at the North Pole. Across a big open patch of sea. In the 2 preceding years, so I did that in 2007. The 2 preceding years, 2005, 2006. 23% of the Arctic sea ice cover literally melted away. I was in a discussion with some scientists in the United States of America who are putting together an expedition north of Greenland. They estimate that this is going to be the last place where we're going to have sea ice left in the world.
And people are forecasting the destruction of sea ice by when?
Oh, this is certainly within our lifetimes. This is within, you know, I don't like to give dates,
no.
But I predicted when I was at the North Pole that it would certainly be in the next sort of 20 years.
One looks at satellite photography and one sees the polar ice sheet getting visibly smaller.
Yes, and then you get people who sit, you know, in front of journalists and say, you know, we're being hysterical. We're not being hysterical. We're looking at the facts straight on, and we're trying to come up with solutions to solve the problems, and they're just being denialists.
Is it about companies making a difference? Is it about governments making a difference? Who's got to take the lead in South Africa, certainly on these issues?
I mean, it's every single person, but especially policymakers. Especially policymakers. I mean, governments have got to step up. I am an ambassador or the patron of the oceans. The United Nations appointed me the patron of the oceans, and I went around a number of different countries recently asking for them to set aside 10% of the oceans as effective marine protected areas. And having come back from this expedition, I realized that that is woefully inadequate.
You were influenced as a young boy, reading the diary, as a geek would, of Christopher Columbus's travels.
Yes.
Did that fundamentally shape you in terms of can we return to the problems Christopher Columbus faced as he crossed oceans, dodging whales and pods of turtles?
It was interesting to read those diaries because they're so graphic, because they talk about what the oceans used to be like only a couple of hundred years ago. And he described how late at night they really, really struggled to sleep. And they struggled to sleep when they arrived in the New World because they were hitting so many turtles. The noise on the outside of the wooden ships was so noisy. And he described how at one stage they thought they were going to run aground. Okay, the oceans have changed incredibly, and most of that, or a large portion of that, has happened in just 40 years. So within our lifetimes.
Your lifetime, perhaps. This was endurance swimmer and ocean advocate Lewis Pugh, his experiences of swimming the 7 seas and the consequences of the degradation of not only the seas but the oceans as well. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow, if we're still here. Good night.